everybody, and welcome to the Penelope Possum channel with me, your hostess, Penelope the Possum. We're going to be watching 10 true terrifying Christmas horror stories for a cold December night, volume 3 by Afternoon Horrors. Please check out the link in the description. For the video link. Now, you might be wondering, Penelope. Hello. Now, some of you might be wondering, Penelope, why are you doing a Christmas video this early? You still have one more video you can make before Christmas comes on Christmas Eve. Well, curious viewer, I'm not going to be streaming on Tuesday because I want to spend my time and energy focusing on my friends and family for Christmas. And as of today's discussion, we're going to be trying to discuss how much Christmas spirit, or spirit in general for anything, is too much. Also, let me know if anybody can't hear anything. I'm going to put on closed captions just in case. Yes, we're staying warm tonight. This will be the last Saturday we see you for a while. Ah, that's lame. Oh well. As long as you're still around for other streams, I don't mind too much. Whatever you can come and catch the stream is fine, you know? But yeah, I'm staying warm tonight. I can't speak for Explodo. He's at work right now. He actually orders us some pizza. I'm gonna have to break the stream for a little while to, go get it eventually. But, just Tuesdays? Okay, that's fine. Obviously, this upcoming Tuesday is a wash. You'll be here? Okay, awesome. Whoever can make it is fine. I'm fine. I'm chilling. It was never about the number of people who are here. It's all about the fun. Yes, pizza. I'm gonna have to run off and go get it eventually. But, yes, I won't be streaming this Tuesday because it's Christmas Eve and I want to spend my time and energy. You'll be cooking? Nice. But, this Tuesday I'll be focusing on my friends and family and spending time with them and all that, and my brain can only handle so many things happening at once. That's why, and this is gonna sound really depressing or weird or unhinged, but you remember when we were playing the Stanley Parable and it described Stanley's job? That kind of job would actually be completely perfect for me. Like, I would kill to have that kind of job. Something where I just sit or stand in one place all day, every day, doing the exact same thing. That is my kind of job. And no, I'm not the kind of person who needs repetitive action every day. I love a little bit of chaos. This room is a perfect example. But if I'm doing something, I need to be, in that thing. I need to be able to zone out and do the thing. Like, just all day. That's why I don't work customer service anymore. You can't really zone out and do that. You have to actually interact with people. And interacting with people is great if you're a good socializer all the time, but I'm not.
It was Christmas Eve. and the snow was falling heavily outside. The ground was already covered in a thick blanket of white, and the world seemed quiet, like
But
everything was asleep. I was in college at the time, far from home, and I couldn't
I was
afford to go back to see
thinking
my family. I had been trying to make peace with being alone, but it wasn't easy. It
I was thinking earlier too about like
didn't feel like Christmas without
how
family, but at least I had my friends, and I had my professor who seemed to know I wouldn't be going home.
I was thinking about what the limit I feel like someone should have spirit for things is. And now I believe everybody is different, and that is a good thing. It's good that everybody's different. It gives the world spice and variety. But well, sometimes you see a house during Christmas or Halloween and you'll see it is absolutely covered everywhere. Every square inch of this house and the lawn and everywhere you can look is covered in decorations. And you gotta admit, to a certain degree, yeah, it's cool to look at in some cases if it's done right. But what point does it get where it's too much and it looks bad? Yeah, see? That's what I'm talking about. When does a bit much become too much? Now, I'm not saying we should impose any kind of limit to how much people can decorate their homes. That's too HOA, and I hate HOAs. But it feels like some people go way too far with the holiday spirit. Yeah. See, I see beautifully decorated houses that have tons of lights on them, too. And it's like, I think the main issue is some people just want decorations, period. No coherent theming or anything. They just want big, flashy decorations. And to me, it's almost a signal like, look how happy we are. Look how good our house looks. Look at how much we spent on our decorations. It feels like you're putting on a show. It feels like you're putting on a mask to hide what's the
He
problem.
must have somehow known I was struggling. I don't even remember how, but on Christmas Eve, he handed me a gift. A reusable McDonald's gift card. He smiled and said, "I know you love the sandwiches, so this should help you get through the day."
I
At
think
first, I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to someone caring about me like that,
once you
but I was
have
grateful, and as the evening went
two
on, I decided to treat
unrelated
myself.
inflatables on
I
your
walked to the nearest
lawn,
McDonald's,
it
still
gets to
amazed by the
looking
kindness of
tacky
my
or
professor.
trashy.
It wasn't much, but it was enough to lift my spirits. The restaurant wasn't too busy, but there were a few people inside. Most of them were alone,
And
just
this thought was actually brought on by something interesting that I've seen 3 separate instances of in my neighborhood. And it's insane that I've seen 3 separate people do this. 3 fully grown adults doing this. I have seen 3 vehicles, 2 cars, 1 pickup truck covered in Christmas lights. That is trashy. That is tacky. That is not fun and spirited. Putting those dumb little antlers and the Rudolph nose on your car is cute and in the spirit of the season. That's fun because it takes almost no effort. And the worst part is that these lights are directly connected into the car's power system. So they are lit up. These cars are lit up. These cars and this truck are lighted up with these Christmas lights, and it is very distracting. And the fact I've seen 3 separate vehicles doing this is insane. Saw a yo boy in his Fast and Furious car that was covered in lights. That's 4! 4 separate instances of these gosh darn people, and it's insane. Does nobody think to stop them? Call the cops? It's a distraction on the road. That is a hard line that I want to draw. Is that if your Christmas spirit is going to cause accidents, or possibly cause accidents, that's where you should stop. Like, it just doesn't stop. How many different vehicles can we find that are covered in Christmas lights? If anybody last week in North Charleston, I'm not gonna bother editing this video. I don't wanna. That's 5 whole different cars and vehicles we're seeing. To all you out there who find this live stream and watch it, I want you to look around wherever you're living. If you live in a place that celebrates Christmas, or if you're in a place where most people celebrate Christmas, try to find as many cars as you or vehicles as you can covered in Christmas lights, and comment down below how many you find. Because I'm not recording this video because I don't want to edit it tomorrow. But yes, let's go into these
like me.
Spooky
There was a
stories.
father sitting with his 2 kids, and I wondered if they were having a hard time like I was, unable to go home for Christmas. It wasn't a Merry Christmas for any of us, but at least I had something to eat.
Damn.
I was waiting for my meal when a guy walked in. He seemed young, probably around my age, and he stepped up to the counter to order. I overheard him talking to the cashier, trying to buy a combo meal. His voice was a little shaky, and I could tell something was off.
Yeah,
He didn't
it's look at me, and it also feels like a lot of the times I feel like it's one person in a household who has an obsession with a holiday. And I feel like a lot of times it causes arguments.
have enough money, and it was clear
People
he was
argue
trying to
during the
figure out how to
holidays
pay.
anyways.
He looked embarrassed, shuffling his feet and looking around like he wasn't sure what to do. For some reason, I felt this pull to help him. I thought about the gift card my professor had given me, and suddenly it felt like the perfect opportunity to pay it forward. It didn't matter that I was already low on cash.
Insane.
I could spare a little to help someone else, especially when they seemed to be in a tough spot. I used my gift card to pay for his meal, and he looked up at me, surprised but thankful. He kept thanking me, and I felt this warmth inside, thinking that maybe this was the best way to spend Christmas, helping someone else out. The guy finished his meal and left, walking out of the restaurant before I did. I sat there for a few minutes, watching the
Christmas
snow
or the
falling
holidays
outside.
with your family, try to spend it helping the less fortunate if you can. Or just helping anybody if you can. And help. Even just trying to help yourself is enough. It's sad to not be able to be with the people you love during any holiday, especially holidays centering around family and love like this, but you know, we all have to do things in our lives. Yeah, just be nice to people. Smile. Wave hello to people. Open a door for somebody, anybody. You're even nice this time of year. You should be nice all the year round, but, especially around this time, a lot of people are struggling. Especially because they can't see their families or friends due to, like, distance between them and other things. Do what you can. Try to just be a good person all year round, but especially during holidays. Because you never know what people are going through.
Wondering what the rest of the night would be
Ugh.
like. There was something peaceful about it, even though I was by myself.
It's a little
I
chilly
stayed for
in
a
my
while,
room today.
finishing my sandwich, and then decided it was time to head back to my dorm.
I can barely
I
see
walked out into the
outside.
snow,
It's so
pulling my
dark.
jacket tighter around me. The cold air hit my face, but it wasn't unbearable. I stuck to the sidewalks, careful not to slip on the ice. I didn't realize at first, but as I passed the side of McDonald's, I noticed a figure standing just behind the building. I tried
Oh
to
boy.
ignore them, not wanting to seem like I was staring, but there was something unsettling about it. It didn't sit right with me. As I kept walking, I decided to take a shortcut behind a building. There were a few trees there, and it was quieter, away from the streetlights. The snow crunched under
Oh,
my
that's
boots as
bad.
I walked down the narrow path, but then I heard something that made my heart skip a beat. It was a sound, a quick, sharp crunching in the snow behind me.
Uh-oh.
My head snapped around, but before I could react, something hit me from behind. It was hard, and I was thrown off balance, falling to the ground in the snow. I twisted in the snow, trying to get up, but someone grabbed me roughly by the shoulders and pulled me over. I fought back, my heart racing, but the person was strong, and I couldn't break free. Then I realized who it was. The guy. The one I had just helped at McDonald's. He
What
was
the
the one
hell?
who had attacked me.
Why?
The same guy who had seemed so grateful just a few minutes ago. He didn't waste any time. He reached into my pockets, yanking out my wallet with one swift motion. He tossed it aside after going through it, stealing my school ID, my debit card, and most importantly, the McDonald's gift card. He didn't care about anything else, just those few things that meant something to me. I could barely
That's so
process what was
stupid.
happening. How could someone I had helped turn on me like that? It didn't make
What an
sense.
asshole.
But the worst part was how easily he did it. How he pretended to be someone I could trust, only to use my kindness against me. Just as he was about to turn and run, I heard a car engine start. It was a campus police officer, parked behind the
Good.
building, and I think he was just having a Christmas drink, maybe hiding from the cold. But luckily for me, he had seen the whole thing. He rushed out of his car, quickly grabbing the guy before he could get too far. I watched
That's
as the
good.
officer cuffed him and took him to the squad car. Within minutes, I had my wallet, my ID, and my gift card back. The guy was arrested, and I found out later that he could have been expelled from school for what he did. I still couldn't understand it. I had helped him. I had given him something when he needed it, and this was how he repaid me? Later, I watched a few courtroom shows on TV, and I saw people talking about how they would never help anyone again after being hurt. For the first time, I could understand where they were coming from. I could understand that bitterness. But that wasn't how I felt. I didn't want to carry that kind of anger with me.
That's
I went to
good.
judicial affairs and talked to them, trying to make sure the kid didn't get expelled. Maybe he was just desperate. Maybe he didn't know what else to do. I don't know, but I couldn't be the one to make his life harder. People do bad
Yeah.
things for a lot of reasons. Sometimes they're not even their fault. And I couldn't stand the thought of making his future worse because of one bad decision.
There's
Maybe
someone
helping someone
mistyped
who
there.
hurt you would change things for the better. I don't know for sure, but I hoped it would. I guess in the end, all we can do is hope that the people we help will be better for it, and that the next person they meet won't be hurt by them. Maybe that's the best we can do.
Yeah, I think that's the best anybody can do.
It was one of those cold, snowy Christmases. The kind where
Don't
the
get
air is
those
sharp
often over
and
here.
everything feels still, like the world is holding its breath. The snow had been falling for hours, blanketing the ground in a soft layer of white. I
Snowing
remember
for
looking out
hours.
the
Must
window
live up
before
north.
going to bed, watching the snowflakes drift past the streetlights, and feeling like something was off, though I
Or
couldn't
just
say
somewhere
why.
where you get lots of snow.
I never believed in Santa Claus. It wasn't that I had some big realization or anything, I just didn't buy it. Maybe it was the way my parents talked about him, always joking around, but it never felt real to me. On the other hand, my little sister was a different story. She believed in Santa with all her heart. She was
Aw,
one of
that's
those
cute.
kids who would stay up late, trying to catch a glimpse of the old man in the red suit, or so she thought. It was early Christmas morning, or maybe it was late at
I hope
night,
this guy
depending on
doesn't
how you look at it, when she woke me
ruin
up.
Santa for
I
his
was
little
still half
sister.
asleep,
That's
trying to pull the
shitty.
blanket over my head, but she wouldn't leave me alone. She was practically shaking with excitement, telling me she saw Santa Claus. She was convinced that he was in our house, leaving
Oh.
presents.
Aw.
At first, I didn't take her seriously. I thought she was just caught up in the excitement of Christmas, but she kept insisting, her voice almost frantic. She begged me to come downstairs and see him. I didn't want to, but I could hear the fear in her voice, and I figured it wouldn't hurt to go along with her. So, I got up, threw on
I'm
my
worried
slippers,
that this is
and
like
followed her down the
actually a home
stairs.
invader or something.
The house was quiet, except for the sound of the wind whistling outside. When we reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze. The front door was ajar. I couldn't believe it. The door was never left open, especially not on Christmas night, not with the cold air blowing in from outside. A chill ran down my spine.
Oh boy,
For a
yeah,
second,
this is
I
a
wondered
home
if maybe
invader.
there was something to my sister's story. Maybe Santa Claus was real. But then I quickly shook off the thought. I figured it was just a draft that made the door slip open. But my sister wasn't backing down. She was still convinced that Santa had been in the house. She told me she had seen him. He had spoken to her, even. He told her not to tell anyone he was there. I remember the way she said it, her eyes wide with excitement and fear.
Oh boy,
Like she had
this poor
seen
kid's
something
about to get
magical but also dangerous.
Santa ruined.
I tried to
for
convince her it was nothing, that maybe she had just imagined it. But she wouldn't hear it. She insisted that Santa had left, but he had been there, in the house, by the tree, watching her. That thought alone made my skin crawl, but I still didn't want to believe it. About a week later, after the chaos of Christmas had died down, my sister and I decided to take a walk to the gas station down the street. It was still cold, and the snow had started to melt a little, but there was still a chill in the air. As we walked,
hands are
my
cold.
sister suddenly stopped in her tracks. She pointed across the street and whispered, "That's Santa Claus." I turned my head, ready to brush off what I thought was just her imagination. But when I saw who she was pointing at, my stomach dropped. It wasn't Santa. It was someone I recognized from school. A guy who had been expelled for getting into too many fights. He wasn't the type of person you would ever associate with Christmas, let alone with anything good.
Oh
He
boy.
was the kind of guy you tried to
Yep,
avoid.
there it is.
I looked back at my sister. She was still staring at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "That's Santa," she repeated, not understanding why I was suddenly tense. Then, she said something that made my heart race. She didn't just think he was Santa. She thought she had seen him in our house. She said that even though he wasn't wearing his suit, he had been holding a present. My mind was spinning. The image of this guy, the one I knew from school, sneaking around in our house, holding a gift, made my stomach turn. He had been in our house, by the Christmas tree, when we were supposed to be asleep. My sister
Ooh,
must have interrupted
creepy.
whatever he was doing. Maybe she had caught him in the act. I could feel my hands getting clammy. I wanted to scream at her to stop, but my throat felt tight. We stood there for a
act all
moment,
capitalized
both staring
like
across the
that,
street, but the guy didn't seem to notice us. He looked around nervously and then turned to walk away, disappearing into the distance. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my sister's hand, and we hurried back home. The door had been left ajar again. I don't know why I didn't think to call the police right away, but I was in shock, my mind trying to make
You were
sense of what had
just
just
a kid.
happened. I finally told my parents what we had seen, and we called the police. They came, took a report, and checked things out, but there was really nothing they could do. The guy had already disappeared, and there wasn't enough evidence to prove anything.
The hell?
They said it was probably just a coincidence.
Yeah,
But I knew better.
Sure.
I knew what had happened. That guy had broken into our house. And my 8-year-old sister had somehow stopped him. I'll never forget how she described him holding that present in his hands, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I'll also never forget the cold feeling that settled in my stomach, realizing how close she had come to being in danger. The thought that this man had been in our house, walking around while we slept, still haunts me, because we were lucky. He didn't hurt her, and he didn't take anything that mattered. But I couldn't help thinking about what might have happened if she hadn't been so brave, or if we hadn't noticed him across the street that day. Looking back,
God only knows.
I'm just relieved that we weren't alone when we saw him, and that we got help when we did. Because who knows how much worse things could have turned out.
I mean,
Growing up in a big family, I always
it's one of the most common things to happen. Burglaries around the holidays. It's sad but true. Really is. And it's especially common for these burglars to try and dress up as Santa, especially if they know there's kids in the house, because then they can get away with it scot-free, basically. Because who's gonna believe a little kid that they saw Santa Claus in their house at night?
felt like one of many, just another kid in the crowd. But there was always one person who stood out, my Uncle Josh. My grandma used to call him an odd duck my mom preferred quirky. To me, though, he was just fun Uncle Josh. He brought presents every time he visited,
Presents?
always knew how to make us laugh.
Oh, this is an
was
AI voice. Ooh.
the kind of guy who could
Spicy
turn
AI
even the
voice.
dullest
Fun.
family gathering into something memorable. His booming laugh and animated storytelling could carry through the house, so loud you'd hear him from 2 rooms over. But one Christmas weekend, something changed. The snow that year was heavy. It blanketed the yard and trees, and the crunch of boots on the driveway was the only sound outside. Inside, the house was warm and lively with decorations, the scent of
Sounds
pine
like
and
fun.
cinnamon filling the air. My cousins
Hold
and
on,
I
I
were
just
running
realized
around, laughing and playing
the
as
image
usual.
of this cabin is
When
also
Josh arrived,
AI
though, he was
generated.
different. He wasn't his usual loud, joyful self. He was quiet,
Well,
too
that's
quiet.
shitty.
He smiled faintly when he walked in, handed out a couple of gifts, but his energy was gone. The man I'd grown up adoring seemed like a shadow of himself. It wasn't
Happened?
just
Did
that
he
he
get
was
cancer or
quiet,
something?
it was something more. He seemed broken, empty. At dinner, he barely spoke. He picked at his food, his eyes distant. I noticed him flinch at sudden noises, the clang of a spoon on a plate, the pop of a champagne cork. My cousin and I were pulling a Christmas cracker, and when it popped, Uncle Josh's reaction startled everyone. He jumped out of his chair, screaming so loudly it froze us all in place. He was shaking, his face pale,
Dogs
his
are
breathing
going crazy
erratic.
outside.
My mom and dad rushed to calm him down, but it took several minutes
little
before he stopped
distracting.
yelling. Then, just as quickly as it started, it was over. He sat back down,
Yeah,
staring
this is
blankly at
mighty
the table, as
suspicious.
though nothing had happened. The whole room was tense after that. No one knew what to say. Later that night, when the festivities were winding down, I overheard my parents whispering in the kitchen. My mom sounded worried. "We can't just send him back to that motel. He's clearly not okay. He needs to stay here tonight." My dad, on the other
I
hand, seemed
see.
hesitant. "I don't think it's a good idea. Look, what happened to him was awful, but I don't know. He's not himself. Who knows what could happen?" Whatever argument followed, my mom won. My dad begrudgingly set up the spare room for Josh. When my mom came to tuck me into bed, I asked her what was wrong with him. She gave me a soft smile, brushing the hair out of my face. "Your Uncle Josh just had a terrible accident recently," she said. "It's made things
No,
hard
that's
for him.
awful.
He just needs some time to feel better. That's all. Everything will be fine. I promise. And her reassurances helped, and I drifted off to sleep easily. For a little while, at least. I woke up in the middle of the night.
Oh, so I just realized I misread the name of this particular YouTube channel. It's After Moon Horrors. After Moon with an M, not afternoon.
It was cold, despite the thick blankets.
That's my bad.
The faint glow of the street lamp outside casting long shadows on the walls.
Okay,
At first, the only sound was the familiar rhythm of my dad's snores from down the hall. I turned over, trying to settle back to sleep, but that's when I heard it. Breathing. It was faint but distinct. A slow, raspy inhale, followed by a shaky exhale. It wasn't coming from my parents' room. It was coming from the hallway. I froze, straining my ears to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The sound didn't stop. It was steady, rhythmic, too loud to belong to one of my siblings. It was an adult. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, my heart pounding. The longer I listened, the louder it seemed to get. I wanted to scream for my parents, but fear kept me silent. My eyes stayed locked on the door, half expecting it to creak open. An hour passed, maybe more. The breathing never stopped. Then, all at once, it moved. I heard footsteps, quick and heavy, running down the hallway. The sound raced past my door, down the stairs and out the back door. The door slammed so hard it rattled the windows. The noise woke my parents. My mom burst into my room moments later, her face pale. "Are you okay? Was Uncle Josh in here?" she asked, her voice trembling.
Why would she be worried
I shook
about
my head,
Uncle
too
Josh
scared to
being
speak.
in there?
My dad appeared in the doorway, his face grim.
I'm getting bad
He placed
vibes.
a hand on my mom's shoulder, pulling her into the hallway. I couldn't hear most of their conversation, but I caught the first thing my dad said. "Josh isn't in his room." Uncle Josh was missing for hours. My dad and some neighbors searched the property with flashlights, their beams cutting through the falling snow. They eventually found him at the bottom of a ravine, not far from our house. His body was wedged in a narrow crevice, feet pointing up, his head crushed between two rocks. My dad said it was barely recognizable, except for the clothes he'd been wearing. The police said it was an accident.
An accident?
They thought he'd wandered out in a confused state, stumbled in the dark, and fallen off the edge. But my dad never believed that. He told me years later, long after I'd grown up, that something about it didn't sit right with him. The way Josh's body was positioned didn't make sense. It was too precise, too unnatural, as if he hadn't fallen, but been placed there. After that night, we didn't talk about Josh much. My mom would give vague answers whenever I asked about him, saying he'd moved away or joined the army. I think it was too painful for her, but I still think about him, about that night, about the breathing in the hallway. Sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, the house dark and silent, I catch myself listening, waiting, wondering if I'll hear it again.
That's so weird.
It was Christmas Eve, and the snow had been falling steadily all day.
What do you guys think happened to that guy? Like, I know the mom said it was some kind of accident, but like, something tells me that fun Uncle Josh did something to piss off the wrong people enough for them to kill him like that. And it had to be personal too, because usually when you just piss off the wrong people, you get shot. This was some kind of vendetta.
By the time night came, everything outside was covered in a thick blanket of white. The icy wind rattled the old windows of our house, and the world outside seemed silent, except for the occasional howl of the wind through the trees. I was 9 years old, the second youngest of 4 kids, and we lived far out in the country. Life was rough for us, especially since my mom had left when I was very young. I barely remembered her face, just little flashes here and there, like a dream I couldn't quite piece together. After she left, my dad's drinking problem spiraled out of control. He was never a good father, but without her, He became almost a ghost in our lives, drinking himself into oblivion, disappearing for days, and leaving us to fend for ourselves.
Yeesh,
Nobody in our
that's
rural
no way to
community
live.
ever stepped in to help. People minded their own business back then, even when they probably shouldn't have. Sometimes I
something
wonder
bad
how different
happened.
things would have been if someone had gotten involved. But back then, it was just us kids, trying to get by however we could. That Christmas Eve, like so many other nights, Dad had gone to the bar early in the day. We knew better than to expect him back
What
that
a
night,
louse.
or even the next day. Holidays didn't mean much to him. Kenny, my oldest brother, was 15 and had taken on the role of looking out for us when Dad wasn't around, which was most of the time. The
Damn.
house felt colder than usual that night, both inside and out. We didn't have much in the way of Christmas decorations, just a scraggly old tree with a few lights on it, but Charlie, my youngest brother, was still excited. He was
Oh,
only
no.
6 and
Poor
still
thing.
believed in Santa Claus. He
Poor
spent most of the
thing.
evening pressed against the frosty window, staring out into the snowy night, hoping to catch a
Oh,
glimpse of
come
Santa's
on.
sleigh.
Don't rip out my
The rest of us were less
heart like this,
enthusiastic.
man.
Kenny and Billy, the second oldest, were holed up in their bedroom, probably trying to forget it was Christmas. That left me and Charlie alone in the living room, him watching the window and me half watching an old black and white movie on TV. It must have been close to midnight when Charlie suddenly jumped up and started yelling, "I see him. I see Santa Claus." His voice startled me, and I told him to quiet down, but he was too excited to listen. "He's out there.
Jeez.
I saw him," he kept shouting, pointing out the window. I sighed, figuring he was imagining things, but he wouldn't stop. "Come look," he begged,
Well,
tugging
there's
at my sleeve.
someone outside for
Finally,
sure.
just to calm him down, I got up and walked over to the window. The cold from the glass seeped through as I leaned in to look. At first, I didn't see anything, just the snow falling softly and the dark outline of the woods beyond our yard. But then Charlie pointed again, his little voice dropping to a whisper. "There, by the trees." I squinted,
Trees.
letting my
Near
eyes adjust to the
forests.
darkness.
Man, what trees?
And then I saw it. A figure, moving slowly through the snow. My heart sank. It wasn't Santa Claus, and it definitely wasn't Dad. The figure was too
that's
far
a
away
good-
to make out clearly, but something about the way they moved made my skin crawl.
You're out
"Stay
in rural.
here," I
This
told
is
Charlie,
probably some
my
fuck
voice shaking
shit.
slightly. I ran down the hall and banged on Kenny's door. When he opened it, I blurted out what I'd seen. At first, he thought I was joking, but when he followed me to the window and saw the figure for himself, his face
Jesus,
hardened.
this is
"I'll stay
scary.
inside. Don't open the door for anyone but me,"
This is
Kenny
some
said
fuck
firmly as he
shit
grabbed his
happening.
coat and boots. I watched as he stepped outside, the cold air rushing in for
Okay.
a moment, before
So, in a little while, I'm probably gonna have to go out and go get pizza. Because I was just informed it's about to be here any moment. So, I'm gonna take off my socks so I don't fall and break my ass.
the door
As I am very likely to do if I continue to wear socks. Yes, pizza! Oh, goodness. God.
slammed shut behind him.
Just an awful existence.
Charlie and
for
I
these
stood
poor
by the
kids,
window,
though, huh?
watching as Kenny made his way across the yard. His breath formed little clouds in the freezing air, and the snow crunched loudly under his boots. The figure had stopped moving and was just standing there, halfway between the house and the tree line.
And I know this is some crazy bullshit. 'Cause they're in rural place. And for anybody that doesn't know, I used to live in a pretty rural place, and fucked shit goes down all the time. Like, one time I read a post saying that the line between rural and supernatural is way thinner than we'd like to guess. Yeah, definitely not Santa. But I'd agree with the person who posted one time, a long time ago, that the line between the supernatural and the rural is pretty thin. There's some weird stuff out there, and I think the further out away from other people you go, the weirder shit gets.
Kenny called out, asking who they were and what they wanted, but the figure didn't respond. They just stood there, watching him. Then, without warning, the figure lunged at Kenny.
Oh
The
no!
movement was so sudden, it made me jump. Kenny shouted, and then we heard it, a horrible, blood-curdling scream that echoed through the night. Charlie started crying, and I froze, unable to look away. In the dim
What
light, I
happened?
could see the figure grappling with Kenny. It was hard to tell what was happening, but it was clear that Kenny was in trouble. Then he fell, disappearing into the snow. The figure turned and started walking toward the house. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Lock the door, now. Billy yelled, running
What
into the
about
living room.
Kenny?
He must have heard the commotion and come to check what was going on. He shoved me and Charlie away from the window and bolted the door. Through the small window in the door, I could see the figure approaching. He was huge, his dark
Horrible.
coat blending into the night, but his face. There was something wrong with it. It looked pale and twisted, almost like a mask.
Yeah,
He started
this is
pounding
some
on the
fucked
door,
shit.
shouting something I
This is
couldn't
a
make out.
skinwalker or some
The sound
shit.
was so loud it felt like the whole house was shaking. Billy disappeared down the hall and came back with our dad's pistol. His hands were shaking as he held
God.
it, but his voice was firm as he yelled at the man outside to go away. The man didn't listen. He kept pounding on the door harder and harder, like he was trying to break it down. Finally, Billy
Oh,
cracked the
Kenny's
door
okay.
open just enough to point the gun out. "Get out of here," he shouted. When the man didn't back off, Billy fired a shot into the air. The noise was deafening, and for a moment it seemed to work. The man stumbled back, but then he started coming toward the door again. Billy fired another shot, this time closer, and the man finally turned and ran, disappearing into the woods. Billy slammed the door shut and locked it again before grabbing his coat. "Stay here," he told us. "Don't open the door for anyone but me or Kenny." Then he ran outside to find Kenny. I wanted to go with him, but I was too scared to move. Charlie and I sat huddled
keep hearing
together, the
things
silence in the
outside, and
house
it's
broken
tweaking
only
me
by
out.
Charlie's soft sobs. Eventually, Billy came back, half carrying Kenny, who was hurt badly. His face was covered in blood, and he had been stabbed in the side. Billy called our cousin, who lived nearby, and she came to take them to the hospital. Billy and I were taken to her house, where we spent the rest of the night. Kenny survived, but it took him a long time to recover. As for the man in the yard, we never saw him again. My dad showed up a couple of days later, drunk as usual, and didn't seem to care much about what had happened. My aunt tore into him for it, but nothing ever changed. A few years later, he drank himself to death, and we ended up staying with her permanently. The Christmas Eve has haunted me my entire life. The snow, the darkness, the strange man in the yard. It's something I'll never forget.
You know what?
Even now,
Fucking
whenever I see
good
snow falling
riddance
at
to
night, I
that
can't help but think
asshole.
about that night
It's a good
and how
thing he
close we
drank
came to
himself to
losing more
death.
than just
Those
our sense
poor
of safety.
kids deserved so much better.
A couple of decades ago, I had a truly awful experience during the Christmas season.
That is
At the time, I was
truly and
working as a
honestly
retail
so
manager at
sad.
a used record store. It was located at the very end of a long strip mall in a busy shopping area.
Like, yeah, okay, great. You're so upset that your wife left you that you're now gonna neglect your kids and drink yourself to death. What a brilliant idea! Why hasn't anybody thought of that before? Fucking morons.
I was always the type who
It
loved
always
sleeping
feels like
in,
the
so
first thing
naturally I
everybody
preferred working the
turns to when
closing
their life gets
shifts.
too tough
One
is
thing I didn't
drinking,
love, though,
or
was the
drugs,
store owner's rule
or
that I couldn't leave
sex.
until at least one other employee stayed behind with
They
me.
just leave whoever else is
He
in the
was
way in the
strict about it,
dust.
saying it was for safety and accountability. It made sense, but no one wanted to stick around for the late-night cleanup and paperwork while the rest of the staff got to go home early. That is, until Jim came along. Jim started working with us in April. He was different from the rest of the staff. He had no issue staying late to close with me. Over time, we became good friends, and I was
Yeah,
glad to
let's
have him
further
around
hurt
on
the
those
poor
late
kids,
nights.
but after their mom took off.
The Friday
That's a
before Christmas
smart
was
idea.
absolute chaos.
Fucking
It always
dumbasses.
was.
I truly and honestly will never have any sympathy for people who willingly ruin their and their children's lives. There are few people in this world I have no sympathy for. People who ruin their and other people's lives of their own free will. People who refuse to get help even if they need it. And most of all, hypocrites. I will never feel any pity or empathy towards these kinds of people. And that might be harsh and that might be mean in some people's lives, but I do not give a good goddamn fuck. Genuinely and honestly, I could not care less if anybody thinks me harsh or mean for these things. Because if it means to be harsh and mean just because I don't like people who can change but refuse to change for the better, then I am a mean person.
But this time,
I
it
held
was
very
worse than
little
usual.
hatred in my heart.
Customers swarmed the store, and by the end of the night, the racks were nearly empty. I knew the owner would be thrilled when he saw how much we'd sold. After closing, I sent all the other employees home.
But I hate hypocrites.
Jim stayed behind as
hate
usual
people
while
who
I went to
refuse
the
to
back
change for the
office to
better.
cash out the register and finish
And
the
I hate
paperwork.
those who hurt others
This was the only time I ever opened the safe,
of their
so I
own free
liked
will
having
and
someone
end up
else in the
fucking
store,
themselves
just
and
in
other
case.
people over.
Jim kept himself busy cleaning while I worked, and we usually chatted
Just-
here and there to pass the time.
Especially not with drugs or alcohol. Yeah.
At one point, I heard Jim turn off the vacuum. That was always the
You have every opportunity to make you and your kids or other people's lives better, and you choose to just waste it away.
last thing he did before coming back to the office, so I expected
Scratch
him
my
to show up
throat,
any
damn.
second. But this time, he didn't. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he got distracted or decided to tidy something else up. But then I noticed something strange. I didn't hear him bringing the vacuum back to the storage area like he usually did. That's when I started feeling uneasy. A moment later, I heard the faint chime of the bell above the front door. It sounded quieter than usual, almost like the door had barely opened or closed. My stomach dropped. The door should have been locked by then. I got up from my desk and stepped into the main part of the store. The lights were already off, so the place was dark and shadowy. It felt
Nope.
eerie,
Oh, this is
being
bad.
alone in the store after
Very
hours for the
bad.
first time ever.
That
Looking
Jim
around,
guy's
I
gonna
noticed the
be doing
vacuum sitting in the
something
middle of
not
the
good.
floor, abandoned. And Jim? He was nowhere to be seen. At first, I thought maybe he'd stepped outside for a moment, though he knew he wasn't supposed to. But then I saw it. Footprints in the snow outside the door, leading away from the store. I moved closer to the glass door, squinting out into the snowy night. That's when I saw Jim coming back. He was walking toward the store, and he wasn't alone. A man was with him. Every instinct in my body told me something was wrong. I quickly reached out and locked the door before stepping back into the shadows. The man with Jim looked up and spotted me through the glass. My heart nearly stopped when he pulled a gun out of his jacket.
Run,
Jim
hide.
looked confused at first, like he hadn't realized I was still there. But when he saw me standing inside, his face twisted with panic. He ran up to the door and tried to yank it open, clearly thinking it was still unlocked. When it didn't budge, he became frantic, tugging at the handle and yelling something I couldn't make out. The man with the gun wasn't having it. He started screaming at Jim, and I could see his anger boiling over. He waved the gun around and pointed it toward the glass, shouting at me to unlock the door. Terrified, I turned and bolted for the back office. I kept expecting to hear a gunshot, half convinced that a bullet would shatter the glass and hit me at any second. But somehow, I made it to the office, slammed the door shut, and locked it tight. The office door was thick and secure. There was no way they could get through it.
There's the pizza. I'll be right back. Pizza's here. But I figure it's a Saturday night. Where'd my headphone go? There it is.
Even with a gun. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the phone and called the police. I stayed locked in that office until I heard the cops banging on the front door. Even then, I waited until I was absolutely sure it was safe to come out. When I finally emerged, the store owner had shown up too. Jim and the man were long gone by then, but it didn't take long to track Jim down. He was an employee, after all. It turned out he'd gotten greedy. After seeing how much cash we handled during the holiday season, he must have decided to stage a robbery, bringing along his armed accomplice. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't locked the door in time, and honestly, I don't want to think about it. I was lucky to get out of that situation unharmed.
Took a long time.
To this day, I still feel a chill whenever I think about that man with the gun
Most people are probably not wanting to cook and
staring at me through the glass. Hey everyone, I'm curious to know more about you all. Drop a comment below and let me know which country you're watching from. I love seeing how far our community reaches. So don't be shy. I'll be reading through the comments. I've always had great memories of Christmas growing up. Most years, the holiday was nothing but joy, laughter, and the kind of warm happiness you'd expect. But there's one Christmas that sticks out in my mind for all the wrong reasons. It's not...
Tonight's pizza is Hawaiian pizza. Yes, I like pineapple on pizza. Fucking sue me. And pepperoni and black olive pizza.
One I like to talk about often, but every so often it comes back to me, clear as day.
If you don't like it, then you don't have to eat it.
What makes it worse is that, even now, I don't know who was responsible for what happened. My family has our theories, and they seem
Here's
logical
another
enough,
thing that
but
baffles
deep
me when
down,
people
there's
get
still no real
actually
answer.
heated over food
This all happened when I was
preferences.
15
Like,
years old,
what?
back in the late 80s. It was one of those winters where the
The
snow
dog,
came
I'm
down
not
thick
gonna
and
force you
heavy
to
early
eat
in
pineapple
December.
pizza.
By the
Just let
time
me
Christmas
eat my
rolled
za in
around,
peace,
the
man.
world outside looked like a picture-perfect
Could be
postcard.
worse things on a pizza.
The fields and streets were blanketed in white, and the trees were covered in a sparkling layer of frost. I've always loved snow. Something about it made everything feel peaceful and safe. That year, though, it felt like the snow was hiding something, like it wasn't just the ground that was being covered up. Christmas vacation started about a week before the big day. Unlike my kids, who only ever seemed to get 2 or 3 days off before Christmas, we had a full week to enjoy. I spent most of my time sleeping in, playing video games, and just being a lazy teenager. Back then, I had an Atari, and even though it's laughably outdated by today's standards, it was my pride and joy. Those first few days of vacation were completely
Oof, an Atari. You can just tell how old this person is just by that.
normal. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, and I didn't feel anything unusual. On Christmas Eve, the house was cozy, and the smell of cookies baking in the oven filled the air. My brothers and I stayed up late watching TV together, the glow of the tree lights reflecting off the snow-covered windows. By the time I climbed into bed, it was after midnight. The air outside was biting cold, but my room was warm and safe. I've always been a deep sleeper, even as a kid. Once I'm out, I'm out. Nothing short of an earthquake could wake me. That Christmas Eve was no different. I fell asleep quickly, excited for what the morning would bring.
Hi,
When I
Louise.
woke up, it was Christmas morning.
Want a bit of
The
bacon?
sun streamed through my window, bouncing off
Or
the
you just
snow
gonna sniff
outside,
it?
making my
Hi.
room look brighter than
Hello,
usual.
are you giving me
I could hear the faint
kisses?
sounds of my brothers downstairs, already up and waiting to tear
Everybody
into their
say
presents.
hi, Louise.
The house smelled of pancakes and bacon as I made my way to the kitchen, where my parents had been up for a while
She's
preparing
looking
breakfast.
a lot better than last time
We
you
ate
saw
together,
her.
laughing and talking about the day ahead. It felt perfect, just like Christmas should. After breakfast, we gathered around the tree. The living room was warm,
soft
lit
and
by the
warm
glow
little
of the
baby.
tree lights and the soft morning sun reflecting off the snow. One by one, we started opening presents. It was the usual chaos of wrapping paper flying everywhere, laughter, and plenty of thank yous. I got some great gifts that year. A few games for my Atari, some clothes I actually liked, and a couple of other things I'd been hoping for. For a while, everything felt perfect. It was late morning when I noticed a small present still under the tree. It was the size of a
She is
box of
pretty
playing
cute.
cards, maybe a little bigger,
Especially when
and it
she's
was
being
wrapped
a
in
little
paper I didn't
crackhead.
recognize. Most of our gifts had been wrapped in cheerful holiday paper covered in Santas or
James,
reindeer,
you're so chubby.
but this one was different. The paper was plain
baby
and dull,
boy.
almost like it didn't belong. I picked it up and looked at the tag. My name was on it, but it didn't say who it was from. I sat down on the couch with the box in my lap. Something about it felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I remember my brothers joking, telling me to hurry up and open it, but for some reason, I hesitated. Finally, I unwrapped it. Inside was
gonna
a
be
plain
something
square
gross.
box with a lid. I took off the lid, and that's when I saw them. Polaroid photos. At first, I thought it was a joke. Maybe it was a silly gift from one of my brothers. But as I pulled the photos out and started flipping through them, I felt my stomach drop.
Uh-oh.
My hands started shaking. Each photo was a picture of me, taken while I was asleep in my bed.
Oh,
The
that's
photos
horrifying.
were clear, even though they must have been taken in the dark. The flash had gone off in every shot, lighting up my face and
Nah.
the room around me.
Oh, fuck that
There were
shit.
8 photos in total, and in
no.
each one, I was sound asleep, completely unaware. What made it worse was that someone had scratched out the eyes on every single picture. Not just scratched them, gouged them out so violently that some of the photos were torn. My dad must have noticed the look on my face because he came over and asked what was wrong. I couldn't speak. I just handed him the pictures. He went quiet as he looked through them, his expression hardening with each one.
Okay, family. it's time to quickly grab a few things, go to a secure hotel, and call the cops. Like, first call the cops, grab a few things, make sure you're safe.
Finally, he turned to my brothers and demanded to know if one of them was behind it. "Where did you get a Polaroid camera?" he asked them angrily. "Was this some kind of joke? Because it's not funny." My brothers both denied it immediately. They looked just as confused and creeped out as I felt. Dad didn't believe them at first. He said if they'd borrowed a camera from a friend or planned this as a prank, now was the time to confess. But they kept denying it. My dad even threatened to ground them for the rest of Christmas break, but they still insisted they had nothing to do with it, and I believed them. There was something about the whole thing that felt too strange, too wrong to be one of their pranks. We didn't own a Polaroid camera. None of our friends or neighbors did either, as far as we knew. And besides, how could someone have gotten into my room to take those pictures? We hadn't been robbed. There was no sign of a break-in anywhere in the house. Nothing was missing or disturbed. It was like whoever took the photos had come and gone without leaving a single trace. My dad eventually called the police. They came and took a report, but it was obvious they didn't take it seriously. They probably thought it was just a dumb prank by one of my brothers or a friend. They didn't find anything, and after a while the investigation, if you can even call it that, was dropped. For a few days after that, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured someone standing in my room, camera in hand, watching me in the dark. I started checking the locks on every door and window in the house before going to bed, but it didn't help. I felt like someone was watching me. Every creak in the house, every gust of wind outside, it all felt like something more sinister. I even tried sleeping with the light on, but that didn't make me feel any safer. Eventually, though, life went back to normal. Nothing else happened, and as the weeks turned into months, I started to feel safe again. My brothers never admitted to anything, and as time went on, I became more and more convinced they were telling the truth. To this day, they still swear it wasn't them. Even now, almost 40 years later, they insist they had nothing to do with it. I never found out who left that box under the tree, or why they did it. My family and I have talked about it over the years, but we've never come up with a solid explanation. Maybe it was just a prank, like the police said. But if it wasn't funny. It's the kind of thing that stays with you, buried in the back of your mind. Sometimes when I'm alone at night, I think about those pictures, and I wonder if, somewhere out there, someone still has the negatives. And if they do, I wonder what else they might have done.
Okay, that is an absolutely fucked up place to end it, I think. Thank you all for joining me here tonight for the stream. Sorry I had to dip out for a sec to grab the pizza. That is genuinely fucked up. How did that person get into there? Why did... And then... There's too many questions with this one. Yes, you guys have an awesome possum night. And Merry Christmas. And Happy Holidays to those who don't celebrate Christmas. As always, my possums, remember to stay out of small spaces that you can get trapped in. Stay out of car engine compartments. Yeah, but he's a kid. So, having a gun while you're sleeping is a little cray-cray. Good night. Stay out of traffic. Stay hydrated. Stay awesome, possums. I love you all. Have a good time, whatever time it is, wherever you are. and have a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. This is Possum signing off.